Hi, everybody hear me? Okay, welcome everyone, and we'd like to thank everybody for joining today, especially in this glorious weather. Thanks for coming on. Just give a little flavor of what's going to happen. I'll introduce the speakers, and we have an action alert that we want to announce, and there'll be a Q&A, which if people have questions, we'd be very glad for you to put them in the chat, and this will enable us to get through, as many as we can, given the shortage of time. Okay, I'd like to do a little introduction first about our panelists, who will say why and how we did the survey, what it exposes, what we've done, and what can be done about the horrific circumstances women and children seeking asylum live in, who, like many other sectors of women and children, are surviving grinding and disabling poverty. Somebody pointed out gently that I'd forgot to say who I was and who Global Women Against Deportations is. So just very quickly, I'm Chrissy from Global Women Against Deportation, which is, it coordinates the anti-deportation work here at Crossroads Women's Centre, and it includes the All African Women's Group, which is a 100-strong organisation of women asylum seekers and refugees from every continent, along with Legal Action for Women, Women Against Rape, and Women of Colour in the Global Women's Strike. Okay, we're organising against destitution because no one should suffer like that, and also because it affects every single one of us. Enforced destitution is a way of lowering everyone's standards and expectations. It's a way of indicating that some people's lives don't count, and that is corrosive to the whole of society. Immigration is used by governments to divide us, to hide what we have in common, and who and what our common enemy is. When the government issued a report on education claiming that white working class children were disadvantaged, a group of Bristol mums spoke for all of us when they said, "This is to get the racists screaming and detract from the issue of how poverty is failing everyone, all poor children, black and white." Immigration legislation is used as economic policy, making asylum seekers destitute while preventing people from doing wage work, creates an army of desperate people that bosses can point to keep everyone's wages down and boost their profits. It is part of the same policy of zero-hour contracts and austerity cuts, which mean workers have less power to refuse exploitation and low pay. This survey is being launched just as the Nationality and Borders Bill gets its second reading in Parliament. This bill aims to further erode people's rights and possibilities of fleeing wars, poverty and climate disasters, and seek safety or a better life. No one is safe, as the Windrush scandal showed. A campaign is being waged today to stop the deportation of a man who has lived in the UK for over 20 years and has 3 children. More about that later. I was interviewed recently on the TV, and some people's racist comments asked why I, as a migrant, was being interviewed. Like I say, none of us are safe. That makes it more important than ever that we get together. Defending people of colour and immigrant people from the Nationality and Borders Bill is part of the invigorated anti-racist, inclusive Black Lives Matter movement, often yet led by young Black women and brown women. We concentrate here on women, but every gender is affected, especially if we are working class. In many justice campaigns, it's mums, the sisters, the daughters who fight to protect their loved ones. We're from many different backgrounds and experiences, from Marcus Rashford, footballer, who always acknowledges his mum and his roots, and uses his status to shame politicians for starving children. To Asim Brown's mother, Joan, who called for help to stop her autistic teenage son from being deported after a conviction for a crime he did not even commit. Hundreds of thousands came forward and we won. The power of the footballers speaking out has put Priti Patel and Johnson on the back foot. They have been forced to defend their racism. This is an international anti-imperialist movement. People everywhere are fighting against deportation and destitution. Just look at Belgium, where hundreds of asylum seekers have been on hunger strike and have so much support that some MPs are threatening to bring down the government if a single hunger striker dies. We must go further together. We hope today's webinar will be a contribution to this growing movement. In defending asylum seekers, we defend ourselves. I'd now like to introduce our first speaker, who is a sister from All African Women's Group. I'm going to hand over to you now, Lou. Hope you're good to go.
Hello, a very good afternoon to you all. As you heard, Lucille from All African Women's Group, we are made up of 100 women asylum seekers and refugees from different countries, not only in Africa, as the name says, but also Asia, Latin America, and from many different backgrounds. We are mothers, lesbian, and bi, some with our children here and some left behind in the countries we fled. The majority of women in our group fled from war, persecution, rape, domestic abuse, amongst other horrendous torture, poverty, starvation, and environmental destruction. Destitution is a common experience for us. It has a long tail. We arrived in this country, we face such hostility and even hatred that we don't claim asylum. We live underground and try to survive in any manner that we can. We do claim asylum, and then we are refused no matter what we have suffered. For lots of the women in our group, like me, we escaped to the UK from domestic violence and death by a whisker. This is violence we couldn't escape from in any other way. This is violence that the police and the government encourage and condone. We had no chance to apply to come to the UK by a so-called legal route. This problem of domestic violence is not only an African problem, it is a global problem. Here in the UK, 2 women in a week are killed by their partner or former partner. Before we find the center, often women are extremely exhausted and anxious from the struggles that they have been making on our own. But when we finally get together, we find our struggles are similar and we feel stronger. We fight destitution by campaigning like this, but also by fighting our legal case and helping others to do the same. We use the self-help guide to understand our case, how present it's to Home Office, with how to present it to Home Office, and how to get support. Many women speak of how they benefited from the guide tool, but put together by Legal Action for Women law. Some things we have found out about them from survey. Number 1, women who have suffered rape and domestic violence don't think that asylum is for them. They think that it is for politicians, journalists who speak out against government and other fleeing from guns and bombs in war zones. Domestic violence is a is seen as a family private matter for us. We are living in our own war zone with as much danger to our life and those of our children's lives. So we are fighting domestic violence to be counted as political persecution and grounds for asylum. Most women don't have lawyers. Legal aid has been cut. When we do, they are often not accountable to women. Other solicitors take money from women that they don't even have, making us even poorer and more vulnerable. Fewer exploitations. Many of us have been detained and even deported because of these bad lawyers. When we are made destitute, our lives aren't valued. We are seen as an easy target for terrible racism, exploitation, rape, and violence. The government know this. Deliberately making women destitute is a policy to promote rape and racism. But thanks to collective work, many women have been rescued and some are helping others to win their case. The Crossroads Women's Center is a healing place. I call it that myself because it is exactly as it says on the tin. You get a chance to see a friendly faces, feel encouraged and more confident. When we make our case for the right to be here, we think of all that is owed to us, to all those women who fought before us and paved way for us by resisting. Over 20 million people were stolen from Africa during slavery and forced to work to make profits for Britain. Over 14 trillion is owed in reparations by Britain alone, a gross underestimate. The theft continues to this date. In Kenya, where I am from, the British colonizers divided huge chunks of the most fertile land amongst themselves to enrich themselves and the empire. Today, we suffer deforestation. Women suffer most because we are the small-scale farmers who people depend on to eat. Instead of being able to grow food, we see plantations for coffee and avocados for export. Our countries, our communities, our families, our livelihoods were destroyed. Yet, when we flee to the UK, we are told we are beggars and scroungers. We also have a right to be here because we are key workers, waged in national health services or unwaged in the society. We are doing the caring work that people's lives depend on. We help keep the society from crumbling with our work, but we don't have status, so we aren't seen or appreciated. That is why we have joined the campaign for a care income. Tonight, you are going to hear about our survey that we did to spell out the truth and extent of our struggle against destitution. We know we aren't the only ones who suffer destitution. We have some demands, and we hope that by fighting to win, we can come together with other campaigners for justice. Our demands include an end to detention and deportation, and an end to the hostile and immigration environment, and an end to the policy of no recourse to public fund, and an end to discrimination against rape survivors. And together we will win. So I'm now gonna invite my sister who is gonna talk to you more about the struggles that we women face. And now I hand you over to Trinity. Thank you.
I am a member of All Africa Women Group. We did a Christmas appeal with legal action for women to help women who are destitute. This year, was very hard because of COVID. We raised money for 48 women and their children. I was shocked that half of the women had no income at all. We decided to do a survey to publicize this situation. Our group drafted some questions. I called 48 women. It took me over a month to get in touch with all of them, and 43 women responded. This is what we ask. Have you applied for asylum and been refused? Or were you scared you will be disbelieved or be detained and deported? Are you a rape survivor who has been discriminated against? Have you applied for NAS? Are you making a family reunion application? Are you affected by no recourse to public fund? Do you get Section 17 support for children? Have you got status and therefore able to apply for benefits? Do you have status but unable to work because of trauma or disability? What we find out was shocking. A lot of women described how they were having to live with people that took advantage of them or were abusive. One was so scared to speak because of her living situation. Nearly half have no income at all. Nearly two-thirds are destitute. All of us, including mothers like me, are living on an income which is below the poverty line. 8 women are supported under the National Asylum Support Service, NAS, which only give us half of what other people get on benefits. Two mothers get Section 17 money from the local authority, but it is only for their children, not for them. 2/3 of women have no status in the UK. 4 have won their cases and have the right to stay in the UK, but have no recourse to public funds. 33 women have suffered domestic violence. I feel so bad that women are in this terrible situation, stressed and depressed, especially when I was asking the question. My heart bleed when mothers told me how their children were suffering back home. No food to eat, nowhere safe to stay. Mothers are traumatized and suffering from what their children suffered. This is still affecting me emotionally, even now as I'm speaking to you. Some of us have fought a good fight with the help of Global Women Against Deportation at the Women's Center and managed to get our children here. We want that for everyone. We are fighting against the way that survivors of rape and domestic violence are treated. We come together to protect each other from the worst impact of destitution and isolation. We are mothers and carers doing vital work, but we have not been listened to. From doing the survey, I feel determined to make sure that women and children are in safe hands, looked after, their case treated fairly, and they are believed. Many of us are here over 10 years. We have to end this destitution, poverty, and suffering for women and children everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trinity. That's really 2 very powerful contributions, which give us, a small idea of what women are going through. I'd now like to introduce our next speaker, who is another mother, and Alice, who's also from All African Women's Group, is speaking next.
I'm going to speak about how rape survivors are treated by the Home Office and therefore why so many of us aren't able to claim asylum or are unfairly turned down. I'm speaking about what we do about this injustice. I grew up in Uganda with the militants, police officers, prison officers. These are the people who brought me up when I was young because I grew up in a camp. I faced a lot of problems of rape, abuse, child abuse. That is my child history. So I grew up very fearful of everything, of officials, and anything to do with any police. A friend told me about Women Against Rape, and I joined the All African Women's Group. I found other women with similar experiences. Hearing them speak gave me courage. The ladies also encouraged me so much that is when I was able to start applying here for asylum. I went to an interview at Luna House. My lawyer told me that they would ask some simple questions. I was with my partner and two women from All African Women's Group. I wanted someone to rely on or depend on. The officials on the door refused my supporters to come in. They said, no, she's not coming in. They said only my partner was allowed in. But I begged. I said, please, at least one of the volunteers should come in to support me. I waited for hours, and then we were taken into a small room by an official. I thought it was a face-to-face interview and that the interviewer was coming in. But instead, I saw myself on a computer screen. No one explained what was going on to happen. I saw someone appear on the same screen and he started to speak. I was taken by surprise. At first, he said the questions are going to be brief. He said they would only require a yes or no answer. I realized it was not going to be a simple interview at the moment when he asked me whether I was raped. My partner was there. Some things you do not rush to tell your partner. So what could I say? I said no, that I hadn't been raped. I was scared of making my partner feel very uncomfortable. Then I asked if my partner could go out. I stopped the interview for a moment so that I could take him out, which was not good for my partner and my relationship because afterwards he did not take it well. It really affected him. He was very upset. He continued to ask me questions, but I was terrified and preoccupied by what had happened. I couldn't tell him that I had been raped. He asked me for more details. I couldn't say because I had become upset. I started to cry and my supporter said, calm down, this is your moment. You calm down, you don't have to talk immediately. When I was crying, the interviewer didn't say anything. He just waited a bit, then he just proceeded from there. I was not able to explain what happened to me. I just said no to guns, to gang rape, to those rape experiences. It felt really traumatizing. I did not want to go back to my past or remember anything. So I couldn't tell him about my experiences. Then he went on to questions about who do I fear, why do I fear going back to Uganda. But I was already shattered with the other things and upset about having to ask my partner to wait outside. The interviewer didn't show any consideration for me. Sometimes I was trying to answer him. He interrupted me saying, no, leave that one. I felt scared. After the interview, my relationship with my partner became much more difficult. He lost trust. He starts seeing that you are not trustworthy enough. You're hiding something maybe from him. I felt traumatized by the interview because I had to go back to my past. Things started coming back. I got nightmares. I had to remember things I went through, like the death of my husband, how he was killed. I started getting flashbacks. Sometimes I can't sleep in the night. So I'm putting in a complaint, and we are campaigning for rape survivors
not to have to attend these interviews. Instead, it would be better if you could do a statement with your lawyer, or even better, speak to someone who understands, like the women from All African Women's Group or Women Against Rape. That is change we are demanding.
Thank you very much, Alice. I know how hard that was, but how important it is that we hear from women direct. So I'm now going to hand over to our next speaker, who is Emily from Women Against Rape. Thank you, Emily.
Hi, everyone, and thanks very much to the previous speakers. Women Against Rape, in its Refuge from Rape and Destitution project, works with women in the All African Women's Group, who you've already heard from, who are seeking asylum from rape and domestic violence. We are members of Global Women Against Deportations, or GWAD, whose survey is being launched today. I'm going to speak about what the survey found out about the discrimination faced by rape survivors and some of our victories. 2/3 of the women in the survey are survivors of rape and/or domestic violence. The vast majority, 88%, are refused by the Home Office and must fight to win their cases at appeal. The asylum system severely discriminates against rape survivors. The important legal precedent, which war helped to win, that women are unable, not unwilling, to disclose rape, is ignored. So are guidelines which acknowledge the long-standing trauma of rape and how stigma and discrimination affects survivors. Instead, delay and minor inconsistencies are used to discredit survivors' accounts, and judges even accuse women of using rape to embellish their claim. Women who can't report their experiences when they arrived in the UK never found out they were entitled to asylum, and by the time they can report, the Home Office refuses their claims because they are told they are no longer at risk on return. The majority of women in the survey have suffered domestic violence, yet this is still not recognised as grounds for asylum, even when the state and the police refuse to protect victims. The Home Office ignores its own country evidence about what survivors face in its determination to refuse women's cases. Discrimination that makes it harder for women to win their cases also imposes more destitution on them, because not winning your case subjects you to years of poverty. Or winning a more limited status, such as that based on family life instead of the rape that you've experienced, means that you are likely to be barred from claiming benefits for 10 years. Destitution is also a barrier to winning your case. It is very difficult to speak about rape when you are dependent on an abusive relationship for your survival, or when you are homeless with your children. Many women are single mothers or remain responsible for children that they were forced to leave behind. Mothers' suffering is particularly hidden, so we are really glad that the survey spells this out. Women Against Rape has been organising against deportation for decades. With our sister organisations, other grassroots campaigners, and more recently, as part of GWAD, we have addressed injustices in the asylum system, which make life harder for victims of rape and domestic violence. For example, we have opposed the privatised NAS system, including where NGOs contract with the government to provide housing. This system prioritises profits, doesn't serve women's needs, and puts rape victims at further risk. The decimation of legal aid leaves vulnerable women unrepresented and at the mercy of brutal Home Office officials. The horror of detention, including the fast track at Yarlswood, in which 98% of cases were refused by the Home Office, the so-called voluntary returns programs that NGOs are also involved in, that include removal of any financial support if you refuse to leave and threaten your children with being taken into care. The new screening procedures that demand intrusive information. The Nationality and Borders Bill claims to be about prioritizing women and children, but it will make it easier for rape victims to be deported. If women don't speak about all they have suffered immediately on arrival, they could be denied the right to even claim asylum. And the bill takes away appeal rights. Destitution will increase as more women are refused and denied support. It is urgent we fight this bill. The tactics employed by the Home Office are the same tactics employed by the police and CPS in rape cases in the UK. War campaigns against both, but we are sometimes having to fight to have the experience of women seeking asylum acknowledged and taken up by the anti-rape movement. The survey doesn't only present a bleak picture, it shows how women have fought and won despite the huge obstacles they face. Some of these victories include a woman who had suffered rape by a priest who was her head teacher. By the time she got in touch with war, she had managed to overturn one appeal decision on her own, but had then been refused again. She had no legal aid, so we helped her to bring her case to the Court of Appeal, insisting that guidance that demands that the court treats rape victims as vulnerable witnesses was applied in her case. She eventually won her case and an important precedent. She then fought for and won substantial damages for unlawful detention. A young woman who came to the UK as a child with her mother. She applied for asylum because she was at risk of trafficking, but she was left in limbo for 9 years while she waited for a Home Office decision. After she won her refugee status, she went on to win compensation for the years of destitution and other suffering caused by the Home Office. One measure of our success is that all the women we have worked with to go to appeal over the past 4 years have succeeded in overturning the Home Office refusal and winning their cases. Within these headlines, there are also countless injustices along the way, including struggles against poor legal representation, decrepit and unlivable accommodation, against detention and the criminalization of poverty, and countless other victories as women inspired each other to refuse to be defeated, to speak out, fight their cases and win. For us, justice is the first healer. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Really powerful and really shows, how important it is that as women, we are absolutely central, in our own cases of fighting for justice, and that way we win. I'm going to hand over now to another of the sisters from All African Women's Group, and that's Marianne. Over to Marianne.
My name is Marianne. I'm a mother of 2. I lived in Refuge for over 10 years. And I feel I'm part of the community. In December, at a time where the pandemic was hitting, many people were dying. It was freezing cold weather. Lucian Council told me I was being evicted. I was living on Section 17, which means the local council gives me £5 for each and every one of us to live on. Women Against Rape wrote to them to ask for a time for me to put on an asylum claim. They wrote back rudely. They gave me a choice to accept voluntary return to my country. But how is it voluntary if the attempt is for me to get evicted in a freezing cold weather with my children? The council threatened to take my children, so I left. Thankfully, one of the women in the All Africans Women group said I could stay with her. We were 2 mothers and 4 children in a small flat. We thought it could only be for a few days, but it took over a month. We did a big campaign. The Home Office tried to say I must take a bus for 2 hours with my children and go to Croydon to claim asylum. We said no, that it wasn't safe in a pandemic. They wouldn't ask their own mother or daughters to do that and risk dying of COVID. We got a lot of support from the local people in Lewisham and other roads to protest. I was interviewed for the newspaper. Eventually, the Home Office agreed that I will claim an asylum. They sent a cab to pick me up for screening interview, and then back to the hostel. To begin with, I had nowhere to cook, which is very hard with 2 small kids. They tried to force me to go to Liverpool, but I said no. Now, after many hard months, I have now gotten a flat where I can cook. It still takes me an hour each way to take my son to school. And again, to begin with, they did not give me money or travel pass. The way they treat mothers and children is horrific. It's as though we are worthless, but we have stayed together. It takes courage to stand up to the Home Office and the council and the police. But I got strength from all other women. I was so determined not to be sent back to what I went through in my own home country. I have shown that if we stand together and fight together, we can win.
Thank you very much, Marianne. I know that was painful and hard, but it was absolutely essential for people to hear exactly what it is. And it is a situation for so many, many women and children. Okay, I'd like now to hand over to my sister in Women of Colour in the Global Women's Strike, which I'm also a member of. And over to you, Sarah.
Oh, thank you, Crystal. What a fantastic lineup of speakers, really moving and strengthens all of us. I just wanted to say that, I mean, as many of you may know, as this launch is happening, the Priti Patel's Nationality and Border Bills is going through Parliament. And the survey and the report is part of the campaign in the fight back to stop this horrific bill. The bill is based on a tissue of lies. First of all, Priti Patel claims that the system is overloaded with meritless claims, but you've just heard from several speakers that have laid out the sexism, the racism, and the prejudice that women and men have to face in the system, and just horrific levels. Legal aid has been cut, so it's now almost impossible to get a good lawyer. And the Home Office officials are trained to really put women through the ringer, and often the interviews, as you've heard, are a form of torture. They make it sound like that Britain is overrun with refugees and asylum seekers, but in fact, Britain takes fewer asylum seekers than most other European countries. And in fact, 85% of refugees are in the global South. Priti Patel is claiming that men arrive and are on boats and are elbowing women out of the way, but in fact, it's the Home Office that's making it so hard for women to claim asylum. And this new immigration plan will make it harder for rape survivors and mothers to actually have a chance to get their experiences heard and to make their case to the Home Office. This bill would bring in a fast track. And again, women would have less time to speak. It will only give people temporary status, so loads of people will be in limbo forever, never being able to settle properly. They're talking about reception centers, and which are offshore detention centers, which is a recipe for rape and other abuse. And we know that from other countries like Australia. What they do is they try to label asylum seekers as criminals or involved in foreign crime, but in fact, Priti Patel and this government are the ones who are the criminals. And we need to throw out this bill by any means necessary. We are standing with asylum seekers to defend ourselves. We know that we all have a right to be here. And the speaker has talked about how much has been stolen from Africa. So we're here to come to collect and to claim along with white working class people. I really wanted to celebrate and hold up what Marion said about how it's hard to fight your case, but when you fight, you can win. And I wanted to mention the people in Glasgow, a community there. They blocked an immigration van for hours and they stopped the deportation. So that's the level of organizing that we can do. And when we do it, we can win. And thank you again for this fantastic event, which will give us all strength. I meant to mention the action alert. The link is in the chat now. And if you visit the site, the Women Against Rape has done a template letter. You can write to your MP, and there are other ideas and suggestions for how to organize and put pressure against the new bill, the Nationality and Borders Bill.
Thank you, Sarah. Really timely and very helpful to put us into the context of this horrendous bill. This is the report. I don't know whether you can see it. And it is now, we had it embargoed, but it is now available on the Women Against Rape website and Refuge from Rape and Destitution blog. So we encourage you to go and get a copy of it. It has, as you've heard, many of the testimonies inside of it, and it's really going to be, we hope, a very useful an informative tool to get around to the whole of the anti-deportation movement and to hopefully slap on the desks of some of these women MPs